Going to give what is known as a ratio of something that's thought to be of a wave-like structure. Waves are arbitrary because they're in time always changing, and it's really hard to put your finger on it. But if you can ratio what a flux is, this is one step towards the direction of what the hierarchy of the, I don't want to say establishment, but really is, ever since Jesus' time, it's the tax collectors are using with platforms to say what is governance. And our government has bent the knee to the tax collectors with allowing a platform to do this operation in. And I'm not going to name names, but it rhymes with miser. With what they've created to make a platform have a thing that isn't natural and yet capitalize off of banking from a miss. Central banking included. And if this gets flagged in the introduction, it's only because I forgot to add in what a ratio of a flux is. When you have a machine and you're not using it on a heavyweight and it's a light one, but you're doing heavy activity, it can ruin the machine because you're overcompensating the slack on it. It isn't calibrated to have that slack on a low amount of weight and you doing an over propulsion. This vlog today is meant to capitalize off of what is the magnification of propulsion. And I took a picture of a spine, which is hard to see. It is also a torso split in half. The spine, I guess, on the other half. Aside from the spine, that's rogue. It is hard to see because the imagery of my camera is bad, for one. But for two, the glare on the glass is providing a frame that is hard to see past. And so if this isn't the opposite of a keyhole inside of a box, which you look through to polarize something at the other end and it looks holographic, easier to see. Scope's made of. Look for that in the third or fourth cut in this vlog. Equal and opposite. You either want to have something stored or something destroyed, and the more that you have power on these things, the distorinator, I slurred that, but put two and two together, that's the main impetus. Not to conflate the realm of possibilities, but in things that are inevitable, you have to go with what's inherent. Instincts are things that you can't teach, and so what these are a premise of is primitive. So in looking what that even comes from, first off, you have to denote your first most things that are important, your brain and your spine. And this is a pictorial of what I drew yesterday, and they kept it up, so I'm capitalizing off of a miss because I didn't like the picture I drew. So invitingly, I then continued it in the reverse direction. Classically in England or in North America, you read going from left to right. Left to right, yeah. And then with diagrams, it's usually right to left. And I know that because this looks backwards, prima facie. That's Latin for on its face. But in any case, yeah, diagrams are supposed to go left to right, not right to left. But here's the spine, the brain. This is a brain detached from the spine. Notably, the brain stem is sticking out there, so I wrote an addition is equal to, these are neurons. Okay, so if you don't know what a neuron is, that's how the brain feels. And then your spine is connected to the rest of your body outside of neurons, but the synapses of neurons are equivalent to regular stimuli that are not neurons but equivalent to neurons everywhere else other than your head. Excuse me. So that's why I put equivalent to two of them, which is a representation, if you could, where they call in math series and sequence, the equivalence of these two together. All these sensations are those two things. So like when you're outside and it's so cold that your face is getting frozen and you don't notice that your nose is running, it's product of your epidermis. The synapses on it have gone dull, so you can't have any feeling of it. And so you might look really bad because you could have toothpaste or snot on your face outside when it's cold. This is not what I guess, yeah, it's a collection of the neurons and then your skin epidermis defaulting. And that what it would be to have like a equivalence of not a solution, because you can't understand that it's on your face and it's there because your skin is that cold. Your neurons are not achieving a solution. So you could just make this look uglier because it already looks ugly right there, because in reality you failed to know that you have snot running down your face. To give this video some depth is that it's super abstract, all of them are, but one thing that you can take to denote from a prefix, this debriefing, I capitalize off of what is a magnitude of propulsion. That in itself is too hard to handle. No, it's I noticed my face is white. I described neurons earlier. I think anyone's face can go flush if they're flustered, and that's one depiction because I've been outside a lot. That's how I travel, is outside. I have a bike without a bike chain, so it takes even longer. I'm outside an extended amount of time absorbing sun, so my face should be white, but right after I describe some anatomy on the board, my face looks really white. Those two things don't go together unless you get flushed, and so that's, I guess, a thing. You can be outside and your face still be white if you're describing something that makes you flush. That's a propulsion that's been magnified. Secondly, this is a mocha from Starbucks. They doubled it with a canister that you quick heat. I guess you pay 60 cents. I take that back, 50 cents, and they'll give you coffee at a library, but you can't use a credit card or a debit card. Side note, you cannot transfer money if it's under $1 on cash apps. I don't like apps, but they say PayPal is a cash app. Credit Karma is a cash app. Transferring these funds, Cash Now is a cash app. You can't transfer funds if they're under $1. So despite the library, wherever you are, if it's something you want to purchase under 50 cents, you can't transfer it to accumulate onto a card that you have. If you lose cards, I'm one of them. So finding the right card to make the transfer is a battle in itself. But to not have that availability, on top of that, here's the propulsion to the magnitude. A lot of places might not even accept a credit card, even if you have the funds on it that are transferred, if you're able to. And so in that scenario, that's where cash apps have the rubber that meets the road in finding an ATM. Separately, if you're finding an ATM, it's cheaper to buy a 17-cent banana at a retail store and select the option for cash back. It'll save you, especially if you're trying to transfer things that are under $1. you'll be in that boat. Earlier I was asking what's a double in propulsion. If you have a cutout and it's within a box and it goes through the box, that cutout is going to have an area where you see through it. And it polarizes in such a way that it could look holographic, the image that you're seeing through it. This is how scopes work, but you can do it with almost anything because there's always a two for one. If you delete someone inside of a comment section, I mean, if you time them out, then their comments are deleted. So if you're thinking one step ahead, not timing out someone because they'll make a burner account for another one, it's almost as if you're magnifying a propulsion because you know the end game. Okay, so there's no soft introduction to what I'm about to say other than I'm about to connect the rapper and owner which sold Young Money, Cash Money to Lil Wayne, Birdman, and Macaulay Culkin, where these two people are influences of what I'm about to say because they both said the same thing. And one portrayed it in a movie. So Macaulay Culkin, he said he has to get his house to get he essentially put a whole bunch of booby traps in his house in order to eliminate a threat. And so in Hollywood, I've seen blinds be shut. If a blind gets shut, it's like equivalent to something being mischievous. What if like you pulled the blind and then the door locked right away? But that would be like that one movie called The Room. I think it was with Jodie Foster, where she got like a certain place in her house where she pressed like a button and then she was able to be safe. In any case, with Birdman, I think he was like explaining how he made his place irrectable, meaning it couldn't get wrecked despite any entourage that would be infiltrating. So those two things that I just said are timeless, and that's that. Alright, so side note on some nomenclature, because it's the side notes on nomenclature are so important because law is like written, and so that being said, it's as real as night and day if you're subject to it. And if it is ever a time where you're subject to law, it's really bad because it can be more real than nomenclature, and that's where it gets legs. AI getting legs, but the word malfeasant is oddly similar to malnutrition, and so when your body isn't understanding things that it should be, that's equivalent to those being the same. And then a different malnutritions, and then shoot, I haven't forgot the word, but then inherent and inert. That's the second subject in the segment of nomenclature side notes. The word inert and inherent are like in binary, they're explaining a whole entire nomenclature of mathematics just described in series and sequences. That's the closest thing in mathematics to binary nomenclature. And the word inherent and inert is like probably what binary is to math, what biology is to math, but in a different category other than series and sequences. I'd probably look into that, but that's definitely a side note worth noting in what nomenclature means. Especially in law, they call it the living body. Adding propulsion, it's who's better in basketball, where there's a guy who had 2 MVPs under his belt, Larry Bird, and he's had that going for him at the same time that you're comparing Luka Doncic. And so the propulsion is a magnitude in the effect of huevos in that situation. But when it comes to cooking in culinary, if you're trying to make something fast, no one wants to slave over an oven. But it's no doubt a fact that it enriches the flavors because it brings out the oils of the food that it's cooking. And probably is better for it when you're digesting and it settles. So putting an oven, a microwave oven, with stuff in it, heating it first, and then putting it in an oven's a way to magnify its propulsion. Flares. There's flares that add a little extra flare. This is on its last stitch, so I'm just documenting how cool it kind of looked. I have a coat that I'll show you in a little bit, and it has an added effect. You get diagonals. The law of threes is like you cut a picture in thirds, and then it is always a nice angle. I always like the diagonal on stuff because it polarizes it well, but you got to know the front and the back of a thing before you can find its diagonal. And this is the case with my flared out coat I'm about to show you. It's got a stamp on it. It's about to be ripped out, so I should document it. It's got holographic principles of things behind it, so it adds to what we were just talking about before, propulsion, when it has a double jump.